This is Making Better Decisions. I'm your host, Ryan Sullivan. Decisions are where rubber meets the road for organizations. Each week, we'll be learning from people who are on the front lines of turning raw data into better outcomes for their organizations. This show is sponsored by Canopy Analytic, helping companies make better decisions using data. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Making Better Decisions podcast. Today's guest did his undergrad in computer science, got a master's in management information systems from the University of Arizona, and then another master's in data science from Harvard. He has worked in the data industry for Freeport McMoran, Mercedes-Benz Financial Services, Daimler Truck Financial Services, and Nestle. He is also an AI ML instructor and mentor for MIT Professional Education's Applied Data Science program. Please welcome VP of Data Analytics and Forecasting at LPL Financial, Nikhar Shah. Welcome to the show, Nikhar.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited and appreciative of you taking the time. I want to jump right into our first question. What is one thing you wish more people knew about using data to make better decisions?
Yeah, it's a loaded question, Ryan, honestly. So I kind of would answer it with three things that you need to have a better decision using data. So the first one is having technical skills or math intuition behind it. And I include like understanding of statistics, probability, and some linear algebra. Um, the second would be in the family of understanding the problem really deeply. And the third would be communication. So if you can't communicate all the learnings, it would be very difficult for you to uh, make your point forward, right?
Mm. I think that's the first time on the podcast that anybody has shared that trifecta with
Okay.
me. It's actually the same thing that I look for when I'm trying to hire folks.
Hmm.
So obviously having my own consultancy, I'm very concerned with folks being able to really succeed in the data realm. And I think you hit all three nails on the head. Obviously, you need to have the technical skills. Otherwise, what's the point? You need to fundamentally understand the business and the questions folks are asking about the business. And then you need to be able to talk to them about it. And if it's kind of like a stool, like if any one of those right? Like
Yeah,
really good communicator really understands the business, but like can't do the tech, like it's like, okay,
yeah, yeah.
or any of the other ones, you take those away and it kind of fundamentally breaks down.
To what you just said is like understanding the problem well kind of is the fundamental kind of platform on which you would apply the intuition of the data, and then that intuition comes from your technical understanding of how different mathematical concepts you could apply in real world. So like applied math would kick in, and then how well you have understood them kind of
Mhm.
becomes the part of your communication, because I feel communication at the end is just the clarity of your thought, and the more time you've spent on problem or the technical skill, the communication just comes natural.
Yeah, well, I think I'm bad at remembering who said what stuff. I'm not like the so and so said it in this year type of guy, but I think it was Einstein that said if you can't explain something to a 5-year-old, you must not understand it that well.
That's right. Yes.
Um, I will say I think that that is something that someone who's already a good conversationalist would say.
Hmm.
I so I personally, even though some of my friends and family might disagree with this, am actually really introverted.
Yeah.
And it is, a bit of an act to, like, come out of my like, I prefer to be in my cave with my headphones on, like, hammering away on the keyboard. I don't mind individual conversations with people,
Uh-huh.
but, I do think that a lot of the people that have really high levels of technical skill sometimes either don't have or don't feel super comfortable
Uh-huh.
on the communicating, especially communicating to very important people or large groups of people.
Yeah.
So that actually dovetails really nicely into the next question. I think that there are a lot of folks out there who, if you look at those three areas of skill you mentioned,
Hmm.
probably are in a good enough position right now. But I know for myself, like, I had to do a lot of learning on the communication side, and obviously, even though I was naturally interested in it, it took a lot of education on the technical and math and all those other sides.
Yeah.
What recommendations do you have for someone who's interested in this space, has the potential to be great, but may not have developed the skills to get there yet? How can they develop those?
I would say um, the two things out of the three that I mentioned is more around practice. So
Mm,
the more you communicate, because I remember coming right out of India in my first kind of stint outside India was coming to United States to get my master's. Uh, I was learning so I used to know how to speak in English, but there are so many nuance that you learn when you come to a new country because there are so many different words that are used differently. All those learning kind of become uh, more of a journey for you because you have to experience it, practice it, make mistakes, enough mistakes to get where you want to be. So like I feel like I'm still learning. There are situations in my personal and my professional life where I get introduced to one American phrase that I have no idea what it means, and then I have to like Google it and understand, oh okay, probably in that phrase meant that in that context. So all that kind of comes down to practice, as I said. And second piece, which is understanding the problem deeply, I think that's also a piece of training, like how often you are thrown a challenge and how easily you can break it into simpler, more manageable problems. So
mm.
can one question be broken down into multiple smaller, easier questions and help you get to the final bigger question that you're trying to solve? The third, which is the technical piece, I would say it's again, it's like practice and training combined. So you have to take those kind of courses. You have to develop a knack for having a technical bent in every situation in life, because I feel math, stats, probability is like everywhere. You just have to find it. And once you learn these courses, just by virtue of learning, you start finding the patterns also in life if you like truly learn and start implementing it in your life.
I love that. I love how you talked about the difference between the learning styles that are required to get good
Hmm.
at all three of those things. I think that's one of the things that has made analytics remain interesting
Yeah.
to me for as long as it has, is that it requires not just learning, but learning how to learn. Obviously everybody has the ways that they connect with and digest and process information.
Hmm.
And as you mentioned, right, like, the technology stuff, you learn out of a book, you hack it together.
Yeah.
It's the same as like learning in school.
Hmm.
And then communication is totally the opposite. And business, again, is like this weird blend of like you just kind of have to have been to the rodeo and seen things. It's just like very, very practical. It's, the almost opposite of theoretical, though I think a lot of people try. Um, so that's really interesting. Another thing that you mentioned, talk to me a little bit more about moving from India and some of the differences in the business landscape, and particularly analytics between India and the US.
I mean, so I graduated with a bachelor's degree in India and I just came to US. So I did not have like ton of experience in India. I did do some internships per se, but not really. So all my corporate experience is from US, which
Mhm.
is a good thing for me because I did not have to unlearn anything. I've heard my batchmates and some colleagues who have worked in India talk to me about how there is a different style of working in India versus US. Um, I have also heard good stuff about working in India and bad stuff about working in India. Uh,
Sure.
but but since I don't have a personal experience, I don't really have much to say on that. Although I do want to talk about when a person kind of leaves everything behind and come to United States to study and maybe make a career. Uh, there are challenges not just on understanding the education system of the new country, but also getting acclimated in like a new society. There are different ways of doing things. There are different, uh, so like, for example, I'm a vegetarian, okay,
Mhm.
and it was like a way for me to find out what things kind of would be a good choice for me. How can I ask for them? How can I make sure that these are my selected few restaurants that I would probably go where I would find the things that I'm looking for. So that was one part of it. The other part is education system is very different in India versus US. So in US, it's everything is application based, and that I absolutely loved. So I used to hate programming in India because it's all like bookish, and then you learn from book and then try to apply it yourself. But in US, professors used to like code in front of us during the class and teach us how would you kind of take that theoretical learning and apply it like a simple toy project. And that learning kind of excelled me into the love of learning, right? And I kind of kept on doing that, and I'm also imparting that through my mentorships and the classes that I'm teaching. So I think the application based learning is the best form of learning, and I feel that there is no other opinion on that, because what could be a better way of learning than just seeing in action and then understanding concepts from it. I don't see any other better form of learning than that.
That's very interesting. Yeah, from having a handful of conversations with folks that have experience in, any other country. Obviously, there's a lot of differences in society, culture, education, business, everything. Um, One of the things that I've heard a lot about India is how there is this like really high degree. So I'm going to use a term that I haven't used in a long time that we used to talk about in my math education is a very high degree of rigor. So like this like very theoretical, like fully understand the fundamentals and the structure
Yeah.
of a given, math discipline or computer science, a language, whatever it is.
Hmm.
So a lot of the folks that I've interacted with that have gone through the Indian educational system have like rock solid fundamentals because of that style of learning.
Right.
But I can say from the areas in my own education that were really heavy in that area, it is not always the most fun way to learn things. Like it is hard to develop really rock solid fundamentals.
Yeah, you're right. And I think in Indian society, math and science are like treated as really important skills to learn in life, regardless of whatever you do in your career, because these are something that develop more of a scientific mindset, and is important for you to have better lucrative careers in future. And given the country who's trying to like become developed and in the journey of converting its like developing status to developed, all the parents are trying to have a better life for their kind of kids,
Mm,
and they are forcing them to have either a math or a science degree so that they could probably just have better pay scale, better salaries, and just lift the family out of poverty. So I think that's another drive for parents to push their kids into math and science.
yeah. And obviously everybody's journey is different. I can say that that kind of like learning how to think
Uh huh.
idea that you talked about has played a huge role in my career and connecting things back to data and analytics. So my undergrad degree was in pure math. I now do data and analytics.
Mhm.
So I use almost none of my degree in pure math, right? Like I'm not doing like abstract algebra and like
Yeah.
complex analysis, like I just don't use it on the day to day.
Mhm.
However, what I found was, first off, you're absolutely right. Like it gave me opportunities, right? Like when I was, still in the stage of life where I was like applying to jobs and doing that kind of stuff, like people would see a math degree and be like, "Oh, okay, right. Well, he can't be that dumb."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know. Um, but I also found that, whether it is science or computer science or math, all of these disciplines are really heavily focused on teaching someone how to think, whether it's,
Yeah.
the scientific method or some of that like math rigor that I was talking about, or computer science and solving problems and learning different algorithms and things like that.
Mhm.
I find multiple times on a daily basis that I use the styles of thought that I developed there
Exactly right.
in analytics very, very frequently.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about, like developing a mathematical intuition behind
Mm,
looking at a problem. That's what kind of gets inbuilt when you are having those kind of degrees, because you're trying to find patterns in problems and see if you have learned that in the past, or can you divide it into like a simpler, smaller problems and design a process around it so that it could be more of a standalone process with minimal human intervention and
mm,
automate it somehow and look for a different problem to solve.
yeah. Obviously, having a conversation between two people that understand, math, particularly applied mathematics and computer science,
Mhm.
it can be really easy to kind of preach to the choir a little bit.
Mm.
And one of the things that I have found is that the vast majority of people that are building or consuming analytics, right? Maybe less so on kind of like
Yeah,
the infrastructure, database, AI, ML, all that stuff. That tends to be very, very technical. But like on the pure analytics side, like making reports, consuming reports, most of those folks do not have math or CS degrees.
that's right.
They have the mindset
Hmm.
to deal with data, especially on the building side.
Yeah,
I wonder if you have recommendations for someone in the analytics sphere to understand what's important out of that without having to go back and do like a 4-year degree in CS or math.
I think the first and foremost that comes to my mind is probability. Uh, so
Mm,
probability distribution, probability calculations, simple statistics. So mean, median, modes, sums, averages, which is, I'm guessing, most of our kind of team members already are using in some way, and if they are not, they can develop. There are so many free resources out there. The third one I can think of, and it could be a little bit of an extension, could be linear algebra. So how how to kind of form equations in simple things. So ax plus bx um, equals to c. Just solve for uh, x's. Sorry, I meant ax plus by equals to c. But anyway, you get that. So these three topics I feel like is fundamental to kind of have a like quantitative mindset and outlook to any problem. And if you have that, I think you will be better equipped with taking better decisions using data, having a little bit of more foresight on what you're trying to solve.
I've thought a lot about this myself. So when I first became a consultant,
Hmm.
it just kind of shook out that I ended up doing a lot of training. Folks had a lot of training needs. So this was way back in the day. Um, a lot of the tools that I use, so kind of Microsoft Power BI and Power Pivot and all that stuff was like very much in its infancy. So there were a lot of people who were realizing the power of, what we can call like the modern data tools, and there are other ones besides Microsoft's tools, but um folks were realizing the power there and they wanted to get ahead of the curve, and there wasn't a whole lot out there. And I was young, I wasn't married yet, like I could travel, I was interested in doing that, like so I was out on the road, once, sometimes even twice a week.
Hmm.
And I thought a lot about this question, like, okay, the vast majority of people in this room are never going to understand and don't want to understand, and it doesn't make sense for their role to understand some of the math stuff that I
Yeah.
spend time learning. What can I take out of that and give to them? And I think one of our answers we share in common. So, a basic idea of statistical techniques. Now, I don't think that people need to go out there and understand, okay, well, here are the 15 most common statistical distributions, and here's a memorization of how you can categorize like the nth percentile. Like, okay, it
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter,
Yeah.
right? We have Google now, or GPT, or whatever you like
Yeah.
to use. For me, it was just like, if you know what a regression is,
Hmm.
and if you know how far away from that regression something has to be considered an outlier, that's really, really useful.
That's right.
Because then when you go in to do data and analytics and reporting and all of that stuff, it gives you a fundamental idea of, is this something just like one time that shouldn't be considered?
Hmm.
Was this a permanent shift that is a new normal? And if so, when did it happen? How can I dig into that? I don't think everybody needs to understand how to calculate all that stuff, but having a rough idea of like, here's a bunch of points on a grid,
Yeah.
there's some sort of curve that goes through those that describes it. And some of them are bad information and some of them are good information. We actually have like really, really robust techniques
Yeah.
for figuring out which are which.
Hmm.
And this helps a lot with data cleanliness. And the number one thing that I hear from data professionals is garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing. And that's a huge, huge tool in our back pockets. The other big one, and this, if I can get a little bit pie in the sky, I think is applicable not just to doing data and analytics. This is hugely applicable to business, relationship, like every facet of life. Part of that might be that I think I'm a little bit like you. Like these things are just like very ingrained in my head. And this,
Hmm.
I picked this path for a reason. So it makes sense to me. But
Hmm.
it's the idea of abstraction. Um, what I mean by that is, let's say that 15 business scenarios happen,
Hmm.
and I can look at them and I'm like, it looks like three things happened here. They were just like different iterations. And you can take those 15 events and kind of be like, no, 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 they all have these common properties and these common properties and these common properties. The reason why I find that so valuable in analytics is because whenever you see a business situation, if you train yourself to think, okay, if I take this up a level and I'm not focused purely on the specifics of this one thing,
Uh-huh.
and I think of this as like an element of some bigger type of situation that could happen, I can learn from that one situation. And then the next time it comes up, I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
So it cuts down on the number of things that I have to learn how to do. I can just kind of have like this general playbook for the small number of things that can happen,
Yeah.
and realize that each one is just like, all right, well, this is iteration 5,000 of the, problem number five.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I think that's where experience comes into picture, and it kind of plays
Yeah.
a important part in it. But I mean, remember, like you are able to do different versions of that same problem because you first time you had spent enough time to understand it and understand different factors that influence it, and now it's just like the second time you face the same problem with a different variable set, you know that the only difference between my past problem and this problem is these new set of variables that I would use it in a new way this time. So completely understand what you're saying here.
Your career has had a couple of very diverse areas of experience in it.
Yeah.
working in the financial industry, particularly the financial industry connected to the automotive industry,
Hmm.
um, mining, very technical, applied AI, ML, that kind of teacher training, coaching aspect of things.
Hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about which things changed across industries and which things stayed the same.
So, what things have changed? Well, the scale of the problem that we are solving with the use of data has changed
Mm,
drastically. I remember when I was at Freeport McMoran, we were handling data sets that were fitting inside an Excel sheet, and we were just importing it through like an R program and do some calculations off of it and give bunch of coefficients as an output. And that kind of reminds me that the scale with which we are productionizing data science use cases has also changed a lot.
mm,
Um, One model from POC through production used to take months, if not multiple quarters. But in the recent times, I've seen that time kind of line have shrink to like days, if not weeks, because now you have the solution, or these problems are so popular, I would say, that the processes around those problems are already created. So, for example, you have a way to write a query that is going to run probably every day, that's going to pick up bunch of Excel files, store it into your database, and it's available next morning. You solve that using like cloud computing, for example, right? That was not that kind of ubiquitous
mm,
back in the day. Once you have the data load problem solved, the modeling piece, you used to develop models every time, like from scratch. But these days, you have some modules that can run like out of the box, like standard models like logistic regressions, if you're doing a classification problem, SVM, Gaussian mixture modeling, all that classification models out of the box. If you're solving a regression problem, then also you have bunch of modules that would run on like a raw data and have bunch of outputs ready for you to analyze. And then you just have to hit like a publish button in some cloud platform to have that model loaded into production in your application in like by the end of this week. But all that that is happening today was not part of our uh, kind of pipeline, because everything was done like from scratch, or there were a bunch of teams involved doing separate pieces of the same problem. So yeah, I mean, productionalization has changed. Processing of the data, like the style of processing has changed. The scale of the data has changed, and then the type of problems that we were able to solve back then with the help of data analytics were mostly about kind of automating the reporting. So most of the companies used to have like a BI team. So they used to have reporting structures that used to give them um, data that what happened in the company yesterday or in the past. With the help of data science, they just started implementing the same report with having more of a forward outlook. So the forecasting was integrated into their BI solutions. Um, that was like their ultimate goal. So, like, can we automate our reporting? Plus, we can have some forward looking numbers with the help of data science. But in recent times, with the advent of maybe better data scientists and more available data scientists, you have bigger problems that are being solved with the help of data science. Like, how do I have a better collection strategy? Like, can I classify my delinquent customers into a high likelihood of recovery, low likelihood of recovery, or medium likelihood of recovery? The other applications these days that I'm seeing is, can we also create a new niche of product that our existing customer, you analyze the customers and see which type of like what is the void in our product offering that we could introduce with the help of analysis. And then finally, with the advent of GPT, you have a lot of thinking piece also being done through data science. So, like summarizing of call transcripts, the summarization of customer comments, and all the other thinking related problems are also being solved using data science. So, those are all the things that have changed. The things that I stayed constant is the things that I just started the podcast with, which is having a math intuition to look at different problems
Mhm.
and able to communicate how would you use those intuitions.
Yeah, I've experienced a lot of what you mentioned. I think that, at the risk of overgeneralizing, like we talked about, it makes sense, right? So economic theory dictates that as a new market, if I can be so bold as to call data and analytics and even, computing a new market.
Hmm.
But as a market matures and develops, we will see a higher degree of specialization and pre-baked solutions to problems that then get handled at scale.
That's right.
And when I first entered the business environment, I think that it was still maybe certainly not everybody, but I would say still common
Mm.
that an individual organization would be like, every problem that this organization has, this organization solves.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
We have our own database, and if we got our own database and we got someone that runs it and manages it and does, X, Y, and Z, like all the pieces of the puzzle, we do those pieces.
Hmm.
And I think it has become over time incredibly difficult to compete effectively with that paradigm.
And expensive.
Yeah, yes,
Uh,
yes, though
yeah.
sometimes it's difficult to convince folks of that. But I'll take a small example, and this will be a great transition to talking about some of the AI and the ML stuff that you have experience with. When I was driving in the car with one of my buddies, and he started talking about ChatGPT. This was a couple years ago, and he was like, "Yeah, like what have you been using it for?" And I was like, "What is it?" I don't really watch the news. I'm doing other stuff, whatever. So he's like, You don't know about this thing?" And he, like, pulls it apart, and he's like, "You can, like, ask it anything, and it will, like, give you all these answers, man. It's super cool." So I'm like, "Alright, cool." I, like, try to, like, pull up this, like, super hard, like, very, very niche question
Uh-huh.
that required, like, cognition and be like, "What's really important about X?"
Okay.
And he asked it, and it didn't. And I was like, "Oh my, this is gonna change the world." And even though a lot of the technology that underlies GPT
Hmm.
has been around for a very long time, right? So like neural nets have been around since what, like, 60s or 70s or
Yeah.
something. I told you I'm bad with dates and names, but it productized it and created something that was digestible by the market that's captured the public's imagination. And so as a result of that, I was like, wow, this is huge. I need to know more about this. So I go off and I learn. I'm like, all right, cool. I do some learning. I'm going to like build my own little neural net. The first example is just like taking handwritten digits 0 through
Yeah.
9 and trying to see if you can build a neural net that accurately tells you,
Yeah.
hey, someone drew a funky looking 9 and the computer knows it's a 9.
Yeah.
So I did this, and of course, I wanted to like hand code everything,
Yeah.
understand everything, build my own backprop, like all this stuff. So I build all this stuff. It takes me weeks and weeks and weeks, right? And I'm doing it after hours and whatever. So I'm like putzing through everything, and then as soon as I finish, I'm like, cool. Like now, let's see what's out there. Like how fast can you develop with these ideas?
Hmm.
And so I go out and I start looking at some of the packages that are out there, and it's like I could have built that entire thing, trained it, done in like 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, there's just whether it's the open source community or whether it is a for-profit company that's coming in and solving a particular problem.
Hmm.
The problems that are getting solved now are there's so many of them that it's capable that you're capable of just like snapping together things that other people have done to solve much more complicated or specific problems
Hmm.
in lightning fast amounts of time.
That's right.
And so it's really exciting. However, I am not an expert in this space, and dare I say you are. So tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on AI and ML. And obviously that's kind of too big of a question. So
Yes.
I think your focus is very much on applied artificial intelligence and machine learning. And obviously this is a data podcast. Talk to me about the intersection of data for business use
Hmm.
and applied AI and ML.
Yeah. So I think data for business use is like, again, a very broad topic, but let me ask you a follow up. What do you mean when you say applied AI and ML in business? Because there are so many business use cases that AI and ML is being used for. So it kind of varies from industry to industry. Finance uh, is using a lot of AI and ML for text based kind of process building. So there are use cases where you have bunch of internal data that you don't really want to put it out for the big corporations, and they take the advantage, create tokens, and sell it to other people. So what corporations are doing recently is they want their own private GPTs internally in the company, and the way to do it is they bring in the open source GPT models like Llama, uh, 3.1, the 8 billion parameter, whatever. And what they are doing is they're pushing that internal data through it, creating some vector databases of their own, and trying to see if we can query on our own data sets internally. So the one use case that we are working towards is getting um, the agent training somehow expedited. So when people join our company, we are trying to see if we can reduce their training time by taking some help of AI and machine learning, where instead of teaching them everything from the very start, can we start having them ask questions through this internal chatbot and develop their own understanding? So let's say I want to make a wire transfer. If a call comes in and you have a training, like a 6 week training on that particular finance piece, great, like you will be able to answer that. But let's say I only gave you a little bit about wire transfer, how it's executed, but then rest could be done while you are on the call and ask over the chat the same question and get that answer right away. um, I mean, I can't really delve much into that, but think about it, there are so many different ways with which you can use companies internal data for like either bringing in better diagnostics on what things are not working inside the company, uh, bringing in more customers, maybe finding gaps where we haven't targeted customers, and also bringing in efficiencies on where we are spending that could be cut down with the help of an internal AI based solution.
See, you didn't even need a follow-up. You had all that awesome stuff in your head. You did exactly what I was hoping, which is just talk about a bunch of really cool stuff
Yeah.
that I think the listeners, get their imagination jogged by. Over the course of the podcast so far, we've gotten to hear a lot about your experience and your successes. One of the things that both I and the listeners are really interested in is what is hard right now, and what are you doing to meet the challenge?
The hard part is still connecting the dots, right? Like you can
Mm.
have great models that can think for you to give me insights on this Excel sheet that I'm just uploading on, let's say, a chat GPT, and assuming you are a pro user. you will upload your Excel sheets and give me just five stories that you can find on the Excel sheet. But I think the hard part is to connect the dot of, given the amount of information that's available today, amount of ways you can process those information, you need to kind of have a 30,000 foot view of how to use different um, solutions available today, um, creating like a agent flow. So which piece can do what kind of job for you, and then yeah, try to come up with newer products, um, better efficiency routines in the organization or in the business. I don't know if that's like too vague, but let me think of a great example here. So let's say if I think about myself, so can a coder be replaced in future? Maybe yes, only by the person who knows what they want to code for, what are they ultimately trying to solve, and where this solution would be consumed as a final product output, right? So in future, I'm expecting you will have agents doing all of these specific pieces individually by different flows. It could be like a large language model solution. It could be more of a design. So yeah, in you will have to interact with AI solutions at every step of your project, and you still need to have your own head how to leverage them in different situation, and that kind of understanding needs to be developed for future AI and ML professionals.
I love it. We've gotten to hear a lot of your experience, a lot of what's hard right now. We've gotten to learn from you. I'd like everybody to have the opportunity to learn about you
Okay.
a little bit. You've mentioned a little bit of, your background, and we introduced kind of your education credentials. What about outside of work and school? What do you like to do for fun? What do you have for hobbies, family, whatever you want to share to give people a better picture of who you are?
Well, I don't really have a lot of different things that I do for myself apart from anything that relates to tech, science. I do kind of enjoy going out on excursions. So I like going out for a bike ride. I'm a very lazy person, if you ask my wife, but but I do enjoy going out for a stroll. I have a 5 month old, and I really absolutely enjoy like taking him out for like a walk, like a bike ride. Um, as I said, like I'm like such a boring person that I'm trying to think what do I like apart from just solving like tech problems, reading bunch of tech articles, watching a lot of tech YouTube channels. Um, not much, but I absolutely enjoy this, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and that's why I don't really feel the need to do more. But I'm a very hands-on person when it comes to doing household chores. So like I enjoy doing some yard work. I do kind of take care of the plants in my yard. Um, that's like having my quiet time, enjoying. I absolutely love chai, so I spend my time enjoying tea in my backyard, taking care of my plants, and having like a quiet sitting life.
Yeah. So you said that that was boring, but that sounds like a pretty good time to me. As you can see, I'm trying to become an aspiring gardener here.
Yeah,
Don't mind those brown leaves down at the bottom. That's nothing to be
it's
concerned about.
always when you bring them in.
Yeah. That's too funny. Yeah, but I mean, between having a 5 month old and a career and a marriage and a house and all that, that's plenty to keep someone busy. So
Yeah,
that's, I'd say, a pretty full life.
it is.
Now, if anybody liked what you had to say today, wants to reach out, connect, talk to you, learn a little bit about anything that you talked about, what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. So my handle is Nikhar Shah. So it's as simple. Um, if you just search on LinkedIn, it's pretty easy to find. I hope so. And I do kind of mentor AI and ML. So people who are trying to break into AI ML field. So I
Hmm.
mentor students there. I do have a meetup group, which is online and based out of Northern Virginia. So it's called Serious Data Science Group. Uh, so I volunteer sometimes in that group as well. So happy to connect anywhere in the mentioned places.
Nikhar, I found this to be an extremely kind of deep and engaging conversation where we got to talk about not just the technology, but a little bit of the how to think about it
Hmm.
that I think really connects between, the abstract, here's what I know, and then here's how and why I'm going to use it.
Yeah.
I know that I deeply enjoyed getting to spend an hour with you, and I know that our listeners will as well. So thank you so much for taking the time, going out there and having a life and reading all those articles and watching all those videos and then distilling it all and sharing it with us here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I absolutely enjoyed my time here. It was kind of like a epiphany for me because I was also learning a lot about myself while talking about myself. So, yeah, it was very, very fun conversation. Thanks, Ryan.
That's awesome. I,
Yeah.
I, I love hearing that. I also want to make sure to thank all of our listeners, especially if you made it this far. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked anything that you learned today, please check out some of our other episodes. Tell a friend, like, subscribe, give us a review, all that stuff that everybody mentions at the end. It actually really does help. That's why we ask you to do it. Um, Nakar, thank you again so much for coming on. This has been another episode of the Making Better Decisions podcast. Thanks for listening. That's a wrap for today's episode of Making Better Decisions. For show notes and more, visit makingbetterdecisions.live. A special thank you to our sponsor, Canopy Analytic. Canopy Analytic is a boutique consultancy focused on business intelligence and data engineering. They help companies make better decisions using data. For more information, visit canopyanalytic.com. There's a better way. Let's find it together and make better decisions. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next week. Peace.